This is Bookmarks with Richard Gadds.
Hello again, I'm Richard Gadds. Today I'm in Bath. I'm at the absolutely glorious Theatre Royal. And I'm here with the historian Dr Nicola Tallis, whose latest book, published yesterday, I think it was, is Young Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nicola, because I know you're having a very, very busy week.
Such a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
That's all right. What made you want to concentrate on the formative years of Elizabeth I?
Well, to begin with, that wasn't the plan at all. I was originally commissioned to write a full biography of Elizabeth, but it didn't take me long to realise that that was something that just wasn't coming together, and that actually it was Elizabeth's formative years and her path to the throne that I was more interested in. And I felt that there was a really, really good story there in its own right that was separate from Elizabeth I, the Queen, and that I felt deserved to be told in its entirety. So that's where it came into being.
Right, because she had a pretty tumultuous childhood.
Yes, yeah, to put it mildly.
Yes, I mean, give us a sort of snapshot of the world that she was born into.
Well, she was born into an unusual world in many ways because her father, Henry VIII, had really broken protocol and precedent by going under plans to remove his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and separating from the Roman Catholic Church in the first place, which was really quite extraordinary, and by instead marrying Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth's mother, who was a commoner, and this had caused huge shockwaves throughout Europe. So the world was still very much trying to come to terms with this when Elizabeth was born on the 7th of September 1533. So it's a world of great tumult and change at the time that Elizabeth's born, and huge uncertainty as well as to what's going to happen within the realm of England and where it fits into the wider context of Europe as well.
Yeah, because it strikes me that it was a very dangerous job being a royal.
It really was. Yes, yeah, it was. There was no certainty. It was slightly easier if you were a male, but for women there was far less clarity on the situation, and this is very much the situation for Elizabeth as well. But yes, it's a very dangerous time to be a royal, and a very dangerous time to be alive generally, I think, actually. Wow, yeah.
Yeah, it's different to being a royal today.
Yes.
So, what were the kind of difficulties that she faced?
There were so many. I think part of them were by reason of her gender and the fact that she was a girl who was born into very much a man's world. And these problems, they do start from the moment that she's born, really, because she is her father's sole legitimate heir, but there isn't a precedent for female rule in England. So this isn't a state of affairs that Elizabeth's father, Henry VIII, is prepared to accept. So there is this air of uncertainty as to where Elizabeth's place is in the world from the moment that she's born. But there are further trials and tribulations to come. Her mother is executed on charges of adultery, treason and incest in 1536 when Elizabeth's less than 3 years old.
Yeah, trumped up charges.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Almost certainly falsified and engineered by the King's advisor, Thomas Cromwell. Yeah.
Because the Boleyn family were a very ambitious bunch.
Yes. Yes, yeah, very, very ambitious, most certainly. But also, particularly Anne's father, Thomas Boleyn, was very well thought of by Henry VIII, and was a trusted diplomat, very skilled diplomat as well. So they're people that are close to the king, certainly in the reign of Henry VIII, and obviously then that's how Anne ends up coming into Henry's orbit.
Yes.
So to speak. Yeah.
So, I mean, Elizabeth strikes me as, if she was growing up today, there'd be a public inquiry and years of therapy.
Yeah.
But how did her early years impact the sort of person she became and the kind of decisions that she made when she became monarch?
I mean, I think most of Elizabeth's decisions when she became queen, we can trace back to events and moments that happened during her childhood and her youth, because I think, the fact that she does have this very, very, I'm going to call it a dangerous encounter with Thomas Seymour, that's hugely traumatic for her. But I think that teaches her caution, and it leaves her with most definitely trust issues. She keeps her own counsel, and we see this later on in her life. These things that happened to her during her childhood made her a stronger and a better queen. The fact that she is imprisoned in the Tower of London by her half-sister, accused of plotting against her, that's also something that teaches her to be shrewd, and to keep her own counsel, really. But she is hugely, very, very wary of those around her, and she knows all too well that there are people working against her at all times, and who are all too ready to drip poison into the ear of the monarch. And that's something that she is certainly very aware of later on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, presumably this is one of the reasons why she never married, because she must have been under considerable pressure to get married.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually during the reign of her half-brother, Edward VI, that she makes the first known reference of her aversion to marry. And so she's a teenager at that point, and so it's obviously a decision that's been made in her own mind quite early on. And who can blame her? Because she has witnessed the way in which her father has treated and discarded of wives, in the cases of obviously her mother first and foremost, but one of her stepmothers has died in childbirth. Henry has annulled another marriage, executed another wife in the form of Catherine Howard. So I mean, that's hugely traumatic for a young girl to try and process. And then I think she would also have been aware at an early age that there were plans afoot to try and marry her off to the highest bidder, basically. She is a pawn in the political game of chess. And this is something that is talked about during the reign of Henry VIII and Edward VI, like, who can we marry Elizabeth off to? So I think that it's no wonder, really, that she actually had this fear almost, I think, of marrying and being under a man's control.
Yeah. How did she manage to avoid, succumbing to the pressure?
Do you know, I think it's a testament to Elizabeth's strength of mind and character, actually. I think she had witnessed the unpopularity of her half-sister Mary's marriage to Philip of Spain, and that had worked to her advantage in many ways, actually. The fact that she was the younger of the two sisters, because she could watch Mary do this, saw that this was deeply unpopular, the fact that Mary was marrying a foreigner, and was something that definitely influenced Elizabeth with her own decision-making. So I think arguably that you could say she came close to marrying several times over the years, but the reality, I think, is that probably actually she was toying, and she never really had any intention of going through with any of these marriages. But yeah, I mean, as we say, who can blame her, really?
Well, quite. I mean, what swayed things in her favour finally? But because of all the argy-bargy about whether she could inherit the throne or not, how did she end up finally being crowned?
Well, it comes about as a result of the tragedy of her half-sister, really. And we know that Mary was very, very keen to be able to provide an heir to succeed her. And very sadly for her, she's not able to do that. She experiences probably one, maybe two phantom pregnancies during the course of her reign. And this really paves the way for Elizabeth's success. We know that Mary didn't really want Elizabeth to succeed her at all, because relations had broken down between the two sisters. But Mary's counsellors and the people, actually, of England, I think, wouldn't have accepted anyone other than Elizabeth as queen. And so as the 1550s progress, as there's sadly no child for Mary, it becomes clearer and clearer that the only viable candidate for the crown is Elizabeth.
Right. I mean, we come to Elizabeth with a lot of baggage, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sort of popular imagery around her and that sort of thing. How much of that is true and how much of that is sort of Hollywood fakery?
Well, I think in some ways it's quite difficult to answer, because Elizabeth the person and Elizabeth the Queen are two separate people. And this is why it's so interesting to study her youth closely, because at that time the persona of Elizabeth the Queen never existed. And everything we know about her in many ways comes with the benefit of hindsight, because we know that she does eventually go on to become one of England's most iconic queens, but she never knew that that was coming. But it is very interesting. This is again why it's important to look at those who are around Elizabeth as well, because there were very few people who got to see that Elizabeth the person away from Elizabeth the Queen. They're very behind closed doors. There are only a few that are admitted to her inner sanctum and get to see her, without that mask of queenship. And I think it's fair to say that probably, there's a lot that's been embellished over time, and Elizabeth the Queen is very different to Elizabeth the person, most definitely. So I think you do have to be a bit careful and try and separate the two. But I actually think it's only by looking at her youth that you can start to differentiate them.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about very few people knowing the real her. Yeah, she strikes me as a lonely figure in history, as somebody kind of friendless, somebody who couldn't trust anybody,
Yeah, I think there's certainly an element of that in the story, but I think it's a bit of both. I mean, whoever you were, particularly if you're a royal, you have to be careful. You have to be careful over who you could trust. But we see with Mary, for example, she had very close relationships with lots of her ladies who were clearly part of that inner sanctum and who she did trust implicitly. Yeah. We do see some of that with Elizabeth, but I think to a lesser extent. And I think that is because of everything that had gone on during her youth. And what is quite interesting about Elizabeth is that, and I think something that's not necessarily talked about a great deal, is the fact that at heart, she was actually a very loyal individual. And if you were close to her, then that was it. You were part of her inner circle for life. And we see this with her lady mistress, Kate Astley, sometimes better known as Cat Ashley, but Kate Astley. And she was one of the few people who'd been with Elizabeth since her childhood. So she probably joined Elizabeth's household just a couple of months after Anne Boleyn was executed. Right. And she, in many respects, did adopt a motherly role towards Elizabeth. And they clearly adored one another. And I think when the Thomas Seymour scandal comes to light, Kate Astley is imprisoned in the Tower and does eventually confess as to what's been going on. And there's no evidence that Elizabeth blamed her for this in any way. In fact, she clearly didn't, because she welcomed Kate back and they were very, very close again. But I think most definitely that left Elizabeth very wary of who she could trust. And I think really she was reliant on her own judgment and learned how to keep her feelings inside without sharing them with others. So I think it probably was a very lonely existence for her.
Yeah. What is it that draws you to the Tudors in particular? Because that's the focus of of all your research, isn't it?
It is. I mean, what's not to love about the Tudors? There's everything, isn't there? There's passion, there's power politics, there's bloody executions, there's trials and tribulations. I just think, obviously not for the people living through these times, but for us as historians and consumers in the 21st century, there are all of the good ingredients there for an excellent narrative, both in books and on screen. And I mean, it's fascinating. And even when, this is something that I find a lot, even when you know the outcome to the story, like with Anne Boleyn, you know she's going to be executed. But when you're researching and writing about that, you're still almost you do become enveloped in the drama, and you're still almost hoping that there will be a different outcome, even though there's not. It's a really bizarre feeling, but yes, it's just full of everything.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, when they're there at the time, obviously we look at it with hindsight.
Yes.
But obviously that's something that they couldn't do.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Have you always been a keen historian?
Yes, ever since I was, to be fair, ever since I can remember, but certainly since I was 4 years old, and my mother used to tell me bedtime stories about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and it was really quite extraordinary. And then I remember very vividly, I think when I was about 6, being given the Weetabix book, children's book of history, and from there we progressed on to the 6 Wives of Henry VIII, and I was hooked from then on, really.
Right.
So, I love it.
So I mean, you've never contemplated any other career?
Well, I have actually, but not necessarily by choice. In fact, I did go down another career path. I didn't have the best experience at school. I didn't do particularly well in my A-levels with history, and so I actually went on to train as a beautician. And I know it's quite a leap, isn't it? And I did that until I had a wrist injury, and I had my arm in a plaster cast, and was feeling very sorry for myself and thinking, what does life have in store for me? What shall I do? And it was at that time I read 2 books and by the same author, and it really reignited my passion. And so this was in 2006, so emails weren't as big then as they are now. And I wrote to this particular author and said, thank you so much. I just want to say you really inspired me and I really appreciate it. Didn't think anything of it. Yeah. Said author invited me to meet her at Hampton Court.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And we met at Hampton Court, and she said, you must go and do a history degree and I'll write your reference. And I had no confidence, but with her backing, she did exactly that, and I applied for university and went and did a history degree.
Fabulous. Can we ask who the hero of that story is?
You can. It's Dr Alison Weir.
Ah,
yes.
Right. Yes, another Tudor specialist.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I was very, very lucky. I've got a lot to be grateful to her for.
Absolutely. Moving slightly at a tangent, what sort of things do you like reading?
Well, do you know, recently, I'll be honest, I do mostly read history because it is just part of who I am as a person, and I also love to see what's out there in the field. And that's okay, that's good. But you know, recently I've been undergoing a bit of nostalgia, and I've revisited my childhood a bit, and I've actually been reading the Enid Blyton books about the Enchanted Wood. Yeah. Which is just, I don't know what prompted me to do that, but I thought that would be nice. So I've been really enjoying that. But I do, every year I say to myself, I'm going to try and broaden my horizons and read different things. Right. So that was my New Year's resolution, was to try different things. So I'm going to try crime this year.
Oh, right. Well, there's a huge field out there to try.
Huge field, yeah. So if anyone's got recommendations, please do tell me, because I don't know where to start.
See me afterwards.
Okay.
I said at the beginning, it's a very busy week for you. What's your schedule coming up?
Very crazy. I'm at Hever Castle in the next few days. Next week I'm in Chorleywood. I've got events throughout the year for Young Elizabeth, which is great, and they're taking me from everywhere, from Gloucester to Alnwick Castle, which I'm excited about. I'm going to be at Chalk Valley this year. There's lots and lots coming up, so I've got details of all of those things on my website.
Right, and is it too early to ask you what you might be working on next?
Well, you can ask me, but I can't give you an answer because I don't know yet.
Oh, right, you'd have to kill me. Yeah.
No, I just genuinely don't know.
Right. Well, Nicola Tallis, thank you so very much for sparing the time to talk to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh.
And I hope to speak again soon. Thank you very much.
Me too, thank you.
That was Bookmarks with Richard Gadds. For more, visit www.richardgadds.co.uk.